Liminal spaces, in strict definition, is an in-between space, passed through without much thought. Hallways, airports, staircases. The aesthetic definition of liminality, though, requires mise-en-scène to evoke a certain feeling, which, like liminality itself, is a sort of in-between of unease and nostalgia. Liminal spaces take familiar setting, and then remove context from the frame. People, furniture, clutter, leaving us with the uncanny scaffolding of familiarity, but evoking eeriness and slight estrangement, embodying the duality of Freud's Hamlet, both familiar and strange. A grocery store at night, an empty swimming pool, a children's playground without the children. All are familiar sights, estranged only by removing the image from its context, crowded in the daylight. Then simply flood the frame with hypnotic lighting and negative space, and you've got yourself a bona fide dreamscape of limitless horror. The term liminal, which comes from a Latin word limen, means threshold, and describes the middle stage of a rite of passage that suspends normal identity. Liminal spaces are the cornerstone of eerie dream sequences or dreamlike atmosphere precisely because they deal directly with this threshold of reality and illusion, destabilizing identity through disorientation. But what exactly makes these spaces so terrifying? First and most foremost is the way they make us linger on places we usually pass through unthinkingly. Airports, hallways, staircases are transitionary spaces, so when the camera locks in on the frame, characters become stuck in the middle of this transition, suspended in a void of unstable identity. In films about adolescence, liminal spaces push characters to the brink of adulthood without letting them really cross the threshold, and so they're frozen in a limbo between childhood and adulthood. The longer they intrude on these liminal thresholds, the stronger their crisis of their suspended identity becomes. I saw The TV Glow as the most striking example of this, a coming-of-age horror which uses liminal space to allegorize the embodied claustrophobia of trans repression. As protagonist Owen lingers in liminal suburbs, he struggles to suppress his real duality and make the psychological and physical transition to embrace his real self, and his identity starts to feel fragmented and illusory. The mise-en-scène in these liminal spaces is a perfect representation of the dream logic that warps physical time and space. In Suspiria, the distorted space reflects the disjoint of adolescence, where the blown-up setting dwarves Susie in size, and in the vivid hallway she's forced to reach up for the doorknobs like a child. Argento's original plan to write the characters as children fragments their identity, as their adult bodies contend with the script and setting created for children, creating a jarring experience. In the setting of Sarah's escape in the back rooms, a window leads to another room full of razor wire, two details that make no sense within the physical space. The characters are trapped in the in-between of liminal space, which is distorted become threatening. In It Follows, time becomes liminal. If you look at the technology, the older CRT televisions, the odd shell phone in the modern cars, it's difficult to pin down the temporal setting, even to the decade. Even the season can't be specified, as characters wear jackets outdoors in one scene and swimwear the next. The inescapability of liminal spaces in these movies is horrifying, because it works directly against the idea of natural movement of transitional space. And if you can't even move through the liminal space, what awaits you on the other side, when you find yourself stuck in a liminal space in horror? Then the characters must face the conflict. Do you linger in the threshold, where you fester repress guilt and let yourself fragment, or do you try to escape? To move behind the curtain, into the hallway, into what horrors may lurk in the negative space. Freudian theory on dreams and on the uncanny both dwell on repression of childhood anxiety. The uncanny is a confirmation of childhood superstition, which has thus been subdued, and the dream manifest feelings of guilt and shame censored by the ego. Many liminal spaces play with childhood nostalgia in their aesthetic. The living room that somehow looks to everyone like the house we grew up in, the McDonald's play place long discarded. But the nostalgia turns sinister when these liminal spaces meet dreams, where the manifested content of the dream twists the innocence of childhood space to bring guilt and shame to the surface. In It Follows, nostalgia for childhood is poisoned by these liminal spaces, as these settings become a threat to the characters. In Suspiria, the enchanting Snow White-inspired Technicolor quickly swaps nostalgia for trauma, as girls hang dead in pools of bright red blood. In It Follows, after Jay encounters the entity, the playground should be a retreat to innocence, but the negative space represents a threat lurking just out of view. The swimming pool, likewise, is slowly poisoned as the water stops representing safety and innocence after Jay has had sex with Hugh and contracts the curse. The childlike spaces Jay reaches for after the encounter turn liminal because she is no longer a child. These spaces betray her the longer she seeks sanctuary in them, lingering to avoid crossing the threshold into adulthood. As the threshold between realities, it's not surprising that horror movies dwell uncomfortably in liminal spaces, as a genre that is always actively working to dissolve binary understandings of humanity. Fisher talks about liminal Lynchian spaces in his essay on visual narrative, saying David Lynch's films are built on precisely this ruptured temporality, where characters become trapped in loops of memory, regret, and dreamlike distortions of time. In a striking example of the liminal space's inescapability, Dale Cooper literally becomes trapped in the Red Room, a dreamscape waiting room where time is disjointed, by his doppelganger, who takes Cooper's place in the real world, completely dissolving the binary between dream and waking, the reality and illusion, the human and non-human. In I Saw the TV Glow, a decidedly Lynchian film, protagonist Owen grapples with the suspicion that he and his favorite character Isabel on fictional TV show The Pink Opaque are one and the same person, and he struggles to imagine that he himself may be a doppelganger, and she being the real person inside of him. In Suspiria, even before Susie crosses the threshold of the doors into the Dance Academy dreamscape, we may notice the eeriness of the doors that are just a bit too small, and the sign that should be German rather than in English. Does she really pass from the waking to the dreamscape, or is the opening a kind of illusion? This is the nightmare of inescapability of the liminal space. How do we know we're really dreaming? And how do we know if we've woken up?
It was a dream. We live inside a dream.
And it's raining post toasties.